it was this interesting melting pot and unique place in the world that I was like, all right, I got to come back to. I want to learn more about what's going on like in this part of the world. Europe was cool, but like this is like another planet. Yeah.
Hello and welcome, fellow human. My name is Zachary Stockill, and you are listening to Humans in Love, a podcast that looks at culture, relationships, and personal development from unconventional perspectives. Join me as I dig into the question of how people like you and I might get more out of life and love. Thanks for being here. Hello, fellow humans. After a long absence, I have returned. It's really good to be doing this again. It's good to be talking to you today. And I'm excited to just share a new episode of Humans in Love. As you know, I took the month of August off, and some of you asked why I did that. The short answer is I want to keep this podcast sustainable, and it's currently a one-man operation. It's a lot of work. It's work I really enjoy, but you know, it keeps me pretty busy. So I think I need to take some time now and then to reset, recharge, whatever you want to call it. And I had a great time. I went down south to the island of Phuket in the far south of Thailand. That was really great. I'm a man who really loves the ocean, and it always re-energizes me to get back down there. And aside from that, and cycling my way around Chiang Mai up here in the north of Thailand quite a bit, it's been a bit busy. It's been a busy month. I think I told you in the last podcast about this BBC News feature that came out. And to my surprise, it turns out this weird little issue of retroactive jealousy is much more common than a lot of people realize, and certainly more so than I realized before. My email inbox has blown up even more. Traffic to my website, retroactivejealousy.com, has probably doubled. It's been a busy month, and I'm really excited about the impact that the article had, and the fact that a lot of people seem to be connecting with what I said in that article. But to anyone listening to this, I guess I wanted to say, you know, it's not easy putting yourself out there with one of the most embarrassing periods of your life. But one thing I've learned is that the reaction is never as traumatic, shall we say, or bad as you think it's going to be. You know, a lot of people appreciate honesty. They appreciate when you're being real with them. And you have the potential to help a lot of people if you're honest about your shit, so to speak. So if you're considering being more open and honest, if you're considering, sharing with some people, it doesn't have to be the World Wide Web, but if you're considering sharing with people, you know, your dark secrets and the parts of yourself that you're ashamed of, you know, choose wisely. Don't share them with anyone. But I have found in my experience that more often than not, it's really liberating, and you have the potential to do a lot of good when you do that. Aside from that, I'll get off my pedestal, my grandstand here, and I will introduce today's guest. Today's guest is Dustin Joseph. Dustin is a friend of mine here in Chiang Mai. He's an entrepreneur. He's a chef. He is a master coffee roaster. And today's conversation is really, well, I guess the way to describe it, it's less an interview and more just a conversation. So my favorite podcast is called Tangentially Speaking with Dr. Chris Ryan. And it's very much a conversational type show where you kind of feel like a fly on the wall for a conversation between new friends. And that's very much what today's chat was about. Dustin and I cover a lot of ground today. He's led a fascinating life. He's lived all over the world. He has done a lot of interesting projects all over the world. And he's really into food, and I really appreciate that. You know, like for me, you know, music is one of my great passions, personal development. But when I meet someone, I don't really care what they're into, as long as they're into something. You know, I like passionate people, hence the subtitle of this podcast. And Dustin is very much a passionate person. He has explored food cultures all over the world, I think just about on every continent. He has done a lot of really interesting travel and cultural and culinary exploration. And he has a coffee company here in Chiang Mai, northern Thailand, that ships to many places in the world. They make amazing northern Thai coffee. They roast it, and he does a really good job. So I think you'll find today's conversation very interesting and inspiring. I certainly did. I love meeting people who have a real zest for life, who are passionate about their work, and who are actively working to make the world a better place. And Dustin certainly falls into that category. Before we get into it, I'll remind you that you can find information about my show and everything we talk about today in the show notes at humansinlove.com. And I'll also ask you, as per usual, to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Without any further ado, I present to you my conversation with Dustin Joseph. I guess the main reason I wanted to talk to you is I want to know how you got here. Like how you ended up in northern Thailand making coffee. First off, like when did you start traveling? Where did that interest come from, do you think?
I think my dad's an interesting character, and I think he brought that on a lot. He inspired me and influenced me to kind of like reach out. He took me to Mexico a couple times when I was pretty young, which I don't think normal North American parents would take you to like rural parts of Mexico.
And this is when, like early 90s kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, the first time I went to Mexico, I must have been 8 or 9 years old. 24 years ago or something like that. Yeah. And we'd go to like I remember like going to Tulum and like that part of like the Yucatan before it was established, before it was, taken over by tourism kind of, so you could like climb around in the ruins and just walk around. It was really unregulated.
And what does your dad do?
It's a long story. He's a creator of sense. He's an architect, an engineer, not really classical trained, but he got his master's mechanics when he was 15 in Ohio and started building cars and working, working in that field. And then he moved to, houses, fine woodworking. He did clay animation for a while. He produced movies as well. I think one of them was a sex education movie he did with clay animation.
Man, I need to interview him.
Yeah, he's a character. And then he had a recording studio in Boulder, Colorado for years. He kind of taught himself how to build it up. I collaborated with him. This had to be 15 plus years ago, but we did speakers as well. Built crossovers, built whole speaker systems, and install them in people's microbreweries or restaurants, or we also built a microbrewery in Colorado, Mountain Sun, for his friend. A lot of stuff. Now he's building the machines, the coffee roasters. He's always just been a creative person and likes to take on projects that become business, and he dives in and builds stuff. And
when you were in Colorado, is this when your path crossed with Hunter S. Thompson?
This was like my uncle and their whole crew of old Naropa and interesting, people who kind of migrated to Colorado back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. It was more of these writers and philosophers and people who were like Ram Dass and a lot of interesting interesting people ended up there. And it was my uncle knew him, and then some of my friends, their family friends, they would always have these like gatherings, and Hunter might show up, or like I think when Bill Murray and Hunter were doing Where the Buffalo Roam, the movie, he ended up like coming to Colorado quite often. One of my favorite stories is the Boulder Golf Club. And they got kicked out because they were trying to shoot their golf balls in the hole with their 45s.
Oh, I don't think I've heard that one.
I don't know. It had to be in the news, but I don't think it must have not made it after that.
That's probably before my time, yeah.
Oh, definitely before mine too.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was a story that my uncle told me, or it's interesting.
So where did you spend most of your youth?
Boulder, Colorado. I grew up there. I grew up in Boulder. I was born in Michigan, and born in Michigan and moved to Colorado when I was super young. 4 or 5 years old, and then after that it was, full time there till I was about 18 when I took off.
And where did you take off to?
The first place I went was Europe, alone. I went to go. Well, I actually went to go meet a friend, but I flew in. I was bought the plane ticket and got inspired to go travel. And at that point, I'd already been living on my own for a couple of years. Had my own house, my own room in a house with some friends, and working full time in a restaurant. So I decided to take a little break and bought a plane ticket and flew to Amsterdam.
How did you what made you want to cook? Where did that interest come from? Were you always a foodie, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think food is it's the connector. It's for people who are, you could probably end up in multiple paths depending on how people support you and guide you in life, but a lot of my friends and a lot of people who are similar to me, they're in that realm of creators or people who want to be hands-on. They're musicians, they're, writers, they're, artists of some sort, they're cooks, they're, chefs. It's I think it's a nomadic path of people who don't want to get stuck in these boxes and reform jobs. So, at that point, I always enjoyed food. I remember making a little bit of money when I was a kid. I was always hustling, trying to make money because I knew I wanted experience and I knew money could buy experience. So, I'd soak toothpicks in cinnamon oil in fourth grade and then sell each individual toothpick for 10 cents or, doing anything to make money. And I remember the first money I saved up, I took all my friends to a restaurant for some reason. Wow. I thought it'd be a fun experience to go kind of ball out and eat something nice. And, I always, I always enjoyed that. And I think I was always interested in just experience. And I think food is one of those things it's a connector, it's an experience. So, but, I fell into that realm because it's a job. And it's a job normally for people who are misfits or can't find their place or, need some temporary work. Hey, come on, wash some dishes and prep some vegetables for a month and you can move to the next spot. It was, it was more of that situation.
And did you think when you were first getting into the restaurant industry, did you think that this was going to be your path in life? Did you want to be a professional chef?
When I first got in, definitely wasn't on my radar completely. I stepped in, I started working in kitchens when I was 15. I think the first job I got was in a grocery store when I was 12. 13, 14, I'd work little part-time jobs in this grocery store. And then when I was 15, I started working in Mustard's Last Stand, this Chicago hot dog stand that's kind of popular in Boulder. It was a good spot. And then I also worked in a barbecue spot that same year. And, I didn't really take it serious. I wanted to cook until I met some other people who were inspiring and chefs. One of my best friends, Latham Hill, and, in Cologne, Germany right now. Brian Lockwood, who's in New York at 11 Madison. Cameron, he's in Chicago with his own restaurant. A lot of the big brothers of the culinary world for me that kind of introduced me and said, if you're talented, you obviously have a good, connection with food, follow it. And then I kept going.
And so tell me about that first trip to Europe. What was that like?
It was liberating. It was.
Is this the 18-year-old backpacking hostel, that scene?
Like I said, at that point, I'd already been living on my own for a while. So I think I got that backpacking vibe out of me. I went alone and I didn't stay in a hostel. Right. I booked the cheapest rooms I could get with a bathroom and, the minimal comforts that I could, afford. But
you're balling, man. If you're in Europe at 18 and you're not staying in a hostel, that's next level.
I've only stayed in a hostel once actually. And it was years after that in Amsterdam. Maybe, I've been to Amsterdam maybe 8 or 9 times now. And, that was an accident. Me and my friend both thought we were on a budget. So he booked the room. He's like, I thought you were on a budget. I'm like, no. He's like, you on a budget? No. What are we doing here? Let's get out of here. I like privacy. I'm not scared to rough it because I've stayed in, I've slept in dirt floors in Nepal and, places in rural Thailand that most people don't even go. I slept on docks of fishing villages for months, exploring the culture and the food and it's not about roughing it, but, privacy. But yeah, that first trip was liberating. I spent a little bit in Amsterdam and then I ended up moving on to Rome and spent, a couple weeks, met a friend in Rome, and then my same chef friend who inspired me to kind of follow that path, my same friend Latham, who's in Germany still. He's been living in Europe for 10 years now. But, it was good. And then Switzerland and moved around and kind of got my first taste to get out. And that inspired me because even you go to Europe, you see different cultures. If you're in the U.S., you might see a select cultures, but you might not get, depending on where you are in the U.S. But, going there, you got to see like this huge African culture. You got to see a lot of this, Middle Eastern and like Persian and, even the Asian culture in bits and pieces. And it was like, it inspired me to go deeper to a place that was even less familiar, meaning, Asia, Africa, or South, places that were nothing like the Western culture.
Yeah, for sure. So did you go back to the States after that?
Yeah, it was 2-3 weeks. I went back. I tried to quit my job. They wouldn't let me. They said they said 2 weeks. I had like 10 days or something they would give me with my job back, and I said okay, I quit then. And they said, well, how long do you need? And I was like 20 days. I'm like, okay, you got your job back after 20 days. I was like, okay, cool. I still ended up quitting that job. And then that same year, why I quit that job is that same year I came to Thailand.
Oh, the same. So you were what, 19?
Yeah. First time I came to Thailand, I was 18. So
what was that like?
It was cool. My uncle's been living here.
Okay.
For he's been coming to Asia for over 30 years to study astrology, Jyotsi, like Vedic astrology, and he's a kind of a spiritual. He has an interest in studying spirituality, religious studies. Yeah, not that too, but he's also like, he's not a Baba guru, but he enjoys this, this culture, and he's been studying it as like more of a philosophy standpoint and like, anthropology, interest in people in general. And, so he'd been coming here forever. And that same year I got back from Europe and my dad was like, me and my dad are good friends. Hey, you want to go visit your uncle? And I was like, after I just got back from Europe, I was like, all I wanted to do was go somewhere else kind of because, I was interested. So that same year we came out here and, I spent 2 weeks and then I went back and I quit my job, again, a different job. And, I also was in culinary at the culinary school at that time. I had a break when I came to Thailand.
So that first trip to Thailand, do you think you would have had any inkling whatsoever that 20 years later you'd be living here basically? Did you have any, did Thailand grab you in that way back then? Or was it more of like a slow burning infatuation kind of thing?
Yeah, it definitely grabbed me. That's why I moved back out here. It was a place that automatically, based on my experiences and my time in the U.S., it was the polar opposite. It was a place that, supported youth and, had a sense of community. It was based around a food culture. They don't interact like, Westerners. They have the mentality of like getting people involved. Come eat, king khao yang. What have you eaten yet? You want to come eat, it's all about food. It was like an interesting, turning point in my mind that I was like, okay, these guys are cool.
And don't you feel too, I feel this way about Chiang Mai in particular, like northern Thailand, but I've also had similar experiences when I've lived in Colombia and India. I feel like particularly like people around our age, like the younger generations, it kind of feels to me like things are getting better and people know that and there's more optimism here. And it's like people, I think they're more optimistic for their children. Yeah. In my experience, it seems like my rough generation here, it's like people are more excited about life. There's more going on. They're more inclined to start up a random business. They're more inclined to take chances. Sure. And there's a real there's a real energy in places like this, particularly in Chiang Mai, I find, among young people that I don't always find back home. What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's also just a different time and a different place. I think we're in a different world out here, especially in the sense of like where things are with the rise of the middle class and things that, you know, maybe Western parts of the world experienced a long time ago. So the people have gone over a hump, and there's like a pessimistic, approach to life in the West because people have kind of been over this zone, and they also get jaded. I think people are jaded in lots of places,
and I think particularly after like the 07-08 crash, yeah. Like I felt that there was a tangible shift in the energy in a lot of places back home. Sure. I think it's starting to get better now. On like recent trips, I've been back to cities like Ottawa and Toronto and Vancouver and stuff. It seems to be, and this is totally anecdotal, I could be totally full of shit, but in my experience, it feels like people are starting to feel good again. But when I really started traveling hardcore, it was right around the time of that crash, and I think it was kind of maybe related to that in some ways, that I think I'd find a better future, outside of Canada. But that's another tangent.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Yeah, exactly.
So you go back to America after your trip to Thailand, and you're studying to be a chef at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I already had some time in the restaurant. I had a couple years working in a, international restaurant, and I wanted to kind of spend my time wisely because I knew that I was going to leave the States and that I wanted to go experience. Originally, I thought I was going to go to Europe, go work in Italy or France and kind of learn more about the roots of like Western cuisine and where they come from. And, I was kind of always curious about this, anthropology and food. And later I realized, it's a thing you could pursue, but I decided to spend my time wisely, so I went to school. I went to a part-time culinary school that was for people already in the industry. Okay. So it was like I'd work from 7 in the morning till like 4, and then I'd go to class from 5 to 11.
It's a long day.
Yeah, it was a long year because it was a 1-year program. So I spent that first year pretty much staying out of trouble. If you're that busy, you don't have much energy to go out after to do different things. So, and it was coming from this background and watching a lot of different chefs and kind of this, non-schooled chef. I didn't have a proper education in the culinary field, so I kind of wanted that. So I had like that clout, I could tell people, hey, look at, I have a piece of paper that I spent a bunch of money on that says I can do something, and then people might take you a little serious, so it was also, that was the point, to get the knowledge a little bit and to get the background, and I don't know if I feel like I got out what I wanted, but I don't even know where that piece of paper is. I never used it. I think I had to pull it up one time when I was traveling, and I had all my knives in my bag, and people were like, "Are you a real chef?" And I was like, "Here's a business card." And they're like, "Does that mean anything?" And then like, "We need to see papers." I'm like, then I think I found it somehow at that point. But
did your relationship to food change in that period? Like, do you feel like you learned much? Yeah.
I mean, definitely, as much as I'm pessimistic about the educational systems in general, it depends on your teacher, it depends on the structure of it. Some of them are over-structured, some of them, the teachers lack compassion for people who are learning, and I think I got a bad teacher. Because it wasn't, I had a bad experience in the sense of like people not being supportive and, me being the person I am, questioning the teacher as well, like, asking questions and trying to be, we're trying to get something out of this. We're paying money. Come on. I'm poor. Like, I grew up with no money too, and I'm spending $10,000 on an education that I'm not even sure if I really want, but I'm taking out a loan to go get it. And at the same time, like, people are not really supportive or allowing you to like express yourself, or, me being the person I am too, growing up in like a Latin kind of background and, wanted to put chilies in my food, and I have these French chefs telling me, no, what do you do? So it was just funny. And also like, growing up in the US, there's nothing sacred. You don't respect certain roots or principles like other cultures do because we don't have the tradition like that. It's a blessing and a curse because we end up taking this and doing cool stuff. That's why we have Hollywood. That's why we have, the crazy music scene we do. That's why we have all these interesting chefs popping out of the woodworks. It's because, there's no guidelines. There's no borders, so, but at the same time, it took me to years later to start respecting tradition, respecting culture.
And respecting the roots of things, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that was the base of it too, because they want you to taste. It's like, who puts salt on your food before you, before you try it? Most people just operate like that in general. They're used to putting sugar and milk in their coffee. That's what they're going to do. They're not even going to taste the coffee first and be like, oh shit, it's sweet. It's, it's already, we don't need this. We don't need to put this in it. It's not, But I think it was a good eye-opening, situation, and it inspired me to kind of dig into the roots a little bit more, even if I did get a bad opportunity or a bad education in this particular school I won't mention.
The shall remain nameless.
Yeah, I don't need to throw people under the bus.
So tell me what you did after school then.
I mean, literally, I bought my plane ticket to Thailand.
Back to Thailand?
Yeah, immediately.
Why?
Because that was the plan. I left Thailand. I went back and said, okay, I got X amount of time. I had a lease on a house. I needed to stack a little money. I needed a goal. And I knew that I wanted to be in Asia. After the same year, at a young age, going to Europe and getting a taste. And then after that, going straight out here and being like, whoa. I came straight to Chiang Mai.
Oh, wow.
Spent 2 nights in Chiang Mai and then went straight up to Pai. Okay. And this was 14 years ago when there wasn't much. I mean, really, I was 18, I'm 33 now, so it's, almost 15 years ago that, Pai there wasn't much going on, and it was a very rural community with a live music and art scene and a melting pot of not just, international cultures, but northern Thailand cultures, Thai
tribes and stuff.
Yeah, Lisu, Lahu, different Burmese sect, there was Shan, it was crazy. It was it was this interesting melting pot and unique place in the world that I was like, all right, I got to come back to. I want to learn more about what's going on in this part of the world. Europe was cool, but this is another planet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really how I felt the first time I went to India, for sure. It's what have I stepped into here? This is nothing I've experienced before. Yeah.
That's what I always say. If you want to visit another planet on Earth, you go to India.
For sure, yeah. Well, my first time going to India, I'd never left North America before, and I was 19, and I went to India for a year. And I'll never forget, I think I probably told this story, but stepping off that plane in the heat and insanity of Delhi in July and just thinking getting this insane cab ride to the airport through the streets and thinking, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? What have I done? I don't think I left the hotel for a day and a half, just trying to come to grips with
staring out the window like a crackhead.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wanting to go get a samosa. But
are they still down there?
Yeah, yeah. So what were you doing in Thailand when you first, did you start working right away or?
That was the plan. I like to be busy, so I think that was my goal. Right away, I was like, all right, I'm going to go back out to Thailand. I don't want to get caught up in this, permanent vacation mentality that a lot of people do. I like to be active. Even if I'm, not taking a job, I'm still going to be doing something. But I actually applied for jobs. So I looked into going to work in restaurants, different restaurants. I was already, in that same year, I moved location from this kind of really popular, interesting, I'll name it because it's a cool spot, the Dushanbe Tea House in Boulder. It's all art installation from Tajikistan. So the whole building's made out of this hand-carved, beautiful art, all wood, super interesting. It's part of the Naropa Buddhist, university as well. It's a connection through the same owner. And, I met a lot of good people there. It was a cool spot, but the food was it was all right. There was some good stuff, but at the same time, it was missing, certain things. So I left that job right when I started culinary school and went to open this 5-star hotel and it was just, crazy work, crazy busy, a whole different mentality. And I ended up having, I was like a line cook, and I was essentially doing sous chef responsibilities. So, I got a good recommendation from the chef as well when I ended up leaving, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna take on a job in like a nice hotel in Thailand somewhere. I ended up getting a job in Phuket. I never took it, but I applied. I put in my application. I spoke to some people. They arranged it. They said, okay, you can come down here and this time, and you got the job or whatever. Based, they're gonna do a working interview, but they're 80-90% sure. I had a certain time because there was low season down there when I came, so I had a couple months to kind of like think about it, and I pretty much was so burnt out from the previous year of just working really hard and school at the same time, and pushing myself to do well in that. And it's also a school still, even though it's culinary. I'm not just cutting vegetables and learning how to make sauce. It's like studying reading books and doing tests, and so it was by the time I got here, I was just burnt. I was so tired that I hit pie and was like, I need to slow down anyway, so maybe I'm going to take this opportunity to just sit back. And I pretty much did 8-9 months in Pi, first time.
Wow.
Without doing much besides learning the language, culture, food, reading books, which I never had time to do before. Doing things that, slowing down, just slowing my life down a little bit and kind of get some insight, which was valuable. Obviously it was definitely probably one of the best decisions I did, instead of jump right into a busy hotel restaurant in Phuket, which is a different world as well. If I think I ended up going to Phuket then, or going to these southern spots, it would have been a different experience for Thailand. Yeah, because it's I've still never really spent time down there.
Yeah, the south, I think a lot of people don't realize how different the south of Thailand is from the north. I mean, it's really kind of, we talk about a different planet. In some ways, it's kind of a different planet up here. And when most people think of, like, I've become like, I think if there's like a tourism board of northern Thailand, like they need to start sending me money, because I've sent more people, like I've recommended northern Thailand to more people and written articles and stuff, because it's just such a special place up here, and it's so different from the south. I think when a lot of people think of coming to Thailand, they think of the world's most beautiful beaches and a lot of really shady sex tourists and stuff, and like, yeah, that stuff is definitely here, but northern Thailand is, the culture's fascinating, and the food is like one of the great undiscovered world cuisines. Really, people are starting to wake up to it. There's some people promoting it and doing a good job of sharing with the rest of the world, but definitely it's still kind of like a well-kept secret, I feel, like northern Thailand.
Yeah, it's just, it's a different lifestyle. I think even people in Bangkok look at Thailand or look at Chiang Mai and these northern areas, they're like, it's rural. It's a great place if you want to go see some nature, but it's not it's not, there's nothing going on up there. Right. And it's just starting to really bubble over right now. There's actually some movement, but it's definitely, it's tough. It's also tough being here and being involved in, different businesses. It's kind of a crazy, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. It's always 2 steps forward, at least 1 back if you're lucky, you don't go all the way back.
Yeah. So last time I was here, you were telling me about doing more travel and doing some kind of anthropological work around food around the world. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about that. Like, what exactly were you doing? And yeah, how was that?
I think after, so let's rewind a little bit, and then I'll speed it up. Pretty much after I came out of Thailand, it was 2005 when I moved out here for that first year, and I absorbed some energy, or I got to sit back and kind of like chill out for a little bit of time to motivate myself to continue to travel, or to go back out and find some crazy jobs and start working. And that at least the 4 years that followed that, I would constantly move around. I'd be like going back to Europe sometimes. I'm based out in Thailand. I'm going to Laos. I'm going to Vietnam. I'm going to Burma. I'm going to, Indonesia. I'm going to Philippines. I'm going to Japan, China. Like I'm bouncing all over the place because it's easy over here. The flights are still cheap. It's things are accessible. And so I kind of started digging into these different countries out here. And then every year I'd fly back to the States and go work for 3 months, something like that in the summer, because that's when, there's extra work, especially in Colorado. I was running a friend's catering company every summer. I'd step in and help him really push it, doing big wedding parties and things like that. So that was kind of my income, and then I come back over here and kind of use it as a resting point, and then ended up getting involved in a little bar project in Pi as well. We opened this little kind of music bar, a fun spot. That was 2006, 2007. Monkey Magic, shout out Monkey Magic.
Hashtag Monkey.
Yeah, which turned into, now it's one of my best friends. He's got the tattoo studio.
Okay.
So up in Pi still, Monkey Magic Tattoo, talented guy. But, yeah, but I mean, pretty much bouncing back and forth, you start to realize that you start making connections. You start seeing, hey, why am I eating doner in northern Vietnam? Why are we having these why is there a cheese culture, baguettes in Laos? Why is there, where did all these things come from? What's this Indian influence, Malay, and down to Portuguese desserts in Thailand, and ingredient wise, and you start seeing these crossovers of similarities in food and food and how they eat the food and how it's presented, how it's prepared, tools, technique. So I started kind of getting more and more fascinated with connecting dots, and it's 3-4 years of bouncing back and forth. Every year I go back to the States, I go to Mexico too. And Mexico's still one of my favorite places in the world. It's a spot that I've always been to since I was a kid. It's, I grew up in a Mexican community in Colorado. I was the only white family in this whole apartment complex. I went to a bilingual school when I was young. I started working in kitchens where I was surrounded by El Salvadorians and Mexicans and this whole Latin culture, which, inspired me to dig into more of that. And then it just popped one day. I said, if I want to keep traveling, I better do something with it. I can't just go back and forth all the time. And, it's kind of I'm scattered. You're not gonna really lay it down and have a foundation in life if you're just nomadic like that. And, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm still nomadic, even though I'm settled down, which, it's tough, but it works. But the year that I got super serious, I was back in Colorado, and I decided to stay put. It was the only year that I've lived in the States in the last 14, 15, and I decided to stay there for one whole year and just work. I was running my friend's catering company, and then I was doing some bunch of side work just to make some money. And then in the meantime, I was studying and planning this trip that I was going to go bounce around the world and study, essentially culinary anthropology. I was I want to put together a book. I want the book to be easy to digest from a normal person's point of view. It doesn't need to be super heady or educational perspective, but more of a humble perspective of why we eat what we eat, how closely the world is connected, and dissecting these dishes and food. So I think that was the that was this epiphany. I was boom, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to produce, I want to educate, I want to go out there and get the information, and then I want to share that with the world and let people know, hey, these people are hating on their neighbors when they're the same people, and we're talking about the connections of Moors and Berbers with Europe. Without them, Sicily and Andalusia and different parts of Spain, it's that's all comes our agriculture, the architecture, the technique down to the pots, the pans. It's a lot of the stuff is taken for granted, or people don't think about it anymore. So that year I was all right, I'm moving. I set an itinerary. I got a friend to go with me who's a journalist. We booked plane tickets, at least 30. I think we booked in advance. We hit 5 continents, 25 countries. I think that year we did. we only ended up documenting about 19 because it was pretty intense.
Only 19. Jesus. I'm exhausted just hearing about that.
Yeah.
So how long did this trip take?
Just under 1 year.
Well, tell me a little bit about it. I'm sure that would take hours, but
Yeah, I mean it was it was a big year, man. But we started in Mexico. I went to places that I considered food meccas.
right.
So I went to places that I think like influence the world in one way or another. Why we eat what we eat, and pretty much just places that blow me away, and places that obviously are like very unique. I mean, Mexico being one of them because it's been at the center of the culinary world for a long time. People don't realize that. People don't even know Mexican food unless you've been to Mexico. It's one of those things too. Like, you don't know Thai food unless you've been to Thailand, because it's really hard to, what is Thai food? There's so many different regions and micro regions and different ingredients that don't thrive or haven't been grown anywhere else. And, so, we started in Mexico and dug into that, talked about, the Spanish, talked about pre-Europe history, obviously, pre-Europeans, which is the interesting history as well, because, the Mayans and then the Toltecs and the Aztecs, and, they were like developed and sophisticated, cooks and people who were, knew their flavor and knew their ingredients, and, birthplace of maize, corn, chocolate,
Birthplace of chocolate?
yeah, vanilla.
Wow. I didn't know that.
A lot of interesting stuff tomatoes are like they're still trying to figure it out, but tomatoes are right around there as well. Between Peru and Mexico, there's so much that happened.
Yeah.
Peru's birthplace of potatoes, chilies, and not just Peru, Bolivia, the Andes. I mean, there used to be no borders back then, so it's hard to, say, but it's, very influential places. And then after Mexico, Peru, which for me was like, it made sense. I was like, Peru is also one of the places that's like so unique. It has the most microclimates out of anywhere in the world, they say, from the desert to the Andes to the south to the north. It's got obviously a huge influence of food. It's got a crazy history with the Italians, with the Spanish. The geographic layout of it as well is very interesting. So things were like hidden and kept kind of secret as well. Second largest Japanese population outside of Japan.
Today?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
One of the largest Chinese populations outside of China.
Wow.
I mean, their national dish, lomo sataro, which is like a great example of like, we talk about fusion. This is what's been fusion's been happening, but it's not something that you just throw on a plate in 30 seconds and say it's, a mix of different cultures, because it's can be an insult. But lomo sataro is like a beef stir fry with these they use yuca or different kinds of potato. I think it's normally like potato. They're almost like French fries, and then there's like a rice pilaf cooked with corn in it, and it's like hominy, like the big choclo, like the big corn. So it's so funny. It's like, you got this rice. Just that right there is ironic, because rice is like obviously it comes from like the Yangtze in China, the short grain, the long grain, like they believe the domesticated versions of rice we eat today are all from China. And you have this dish of like a rice pilaf with corn cooked into it, which is like, corn's obviously like a big staple of, Latin American cuisine, because it's the Mayans and further on, all Aztecs, Toltecs believe men are made of corn. It's like the spiritual background, like corn is God. It's like, that's what, like wheat in the Roman times, or like rice in China. There's a big respect of what feeds you. They're fermenting it. They're making sakes or sojus, and the Egyptians were making beer with wheat. It's like, it's the grain that sustains. It's the one thing that kept people alive. So it was it was interesting.
What are you guys actually doing when you're doing this research? Are you interviewing people, or are you just walking around and eating and reading books, or like?
That was the thing. It depends, because it was one of those ambitious things. I was maybe, it's almost, I was like in mid 20s. So I was like, I'm gonna go around the world. I want to get as much information as possible. And a lot of people were like, what's the end goal? how are you making money? And I was like, the thing is that we haven't thought about that. It was all about collecting information. It was all about connecting with people and collecting information, and then putting stuff behind us that we can figure out what we want to do with it in the future. Some places were easier than others because we had connections. In Peru, we were hanging out with like the gastronomy founder of Peru, and like, Anton Gaston, and like, we went to Central in Lima, which was like, it was a kind of a random occurrence. We were staying with this group of chefs who took us around and introduced us to all their, what was going on. I mean, Central is number 4 in the world right now in top restaurants. It's also, amazing spot. But we went there because they had a pisco collection that was,
love pisco.
Yeah, it was apparently one of the largest pisco collections in Peru at the time. So we were like, okay, we'll go check this out, and did a whole tasting, and they broke it down. And, pisco being a distillation of grapes, and coming from Europe, and you find it in these places. It's always interesting to dissect these things that aren't necessarily native of the land, but how did they get there? That same trip in Peru, we were working with National Geographic writers and, different crazy people who were taking us around Cusco and showing us their, heirloom quinoa plantations, and, just, collecting information, taking photos, interviewing people, doing video. Unfortunately, a lot of it's never really been used. I had a website up the whole time. I was doing kind of a blog about it called Urban Cuisine Tour. The name might not match the concept, but back then it was kind of the idea to hit the urban areas, because you go to the city, you can get a taste of the whole country. It's where everyone migrates from every corner to make a living. So, and then from there we just kept moving. It was like Argentina after that, because it's such a weird place. No offense to all my Argentinian friends, but it's just strange because it was it's so European. And when the Spanish arrived, and then later on the Italians and Germans, and a lot of the different European cultures kind of took over Argentina, because the natives there in the Pampas were very nomadic. There weren't people that were easily to deal with, apparently. And who knows, but there was some of the biggest genocides occurred in those areas. So it was also very, it's sad, but then at the same time, these things happen, and it gives birth to a whole nother thing. And it was crazy to see. It was like going to like a version of Europe and South America, and then on the outsides of different areas. I mean, unless you go up north in Argentina or south, there's still a lot of cool cultures, and but it was just interesting to see like very like Italian. Like we're like, I feel like I'm in Naples, and then at the same time you don't really see much different skin tones, and then after that it was Brazil, because Brazil's first, it's an amazing place, but then it's also one of the biggest melting pots of the world still. It's got a crazy history, and it's also where 70-80% of the slaves came through in Bahia, and so there's like food up there that's like nothing else. You got Yoruba African food up in Bahia that's like so unique, so interesting. You got then down in the south in the Pampas in São Paulo, and then up in like Minas Gerais, like that area outside of Rio was like, that's where all the mining happened, so that was where the money was coming. That's where all the wealthy people were at, and it was definitely it's a crazy spot. And
I got to get to Brazil, because I feel like Brazilians have figured some really important things out about life. Like they're having a good time. You know what I mean? Well, they're just the music and the food and the spirit of the people is just, of course this is crazy generalization I'm making, but yeah, that's high on my list. I got to get over there, because I feel like they figured they're having a good time,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think they've been through so much too that once you go over the hump, there's no other. Once you're at the bottom too, there's nowhere else to go but up.
So true. Yeah. So many times, like when you're traveling, it seems like the happiest people you meet are the people with the least. Over and over. It's true. That's why it's good. That's why traveling's awesome too. I always say it's like. I mean, it's perspective. I always joke, but it's serious. Like perspective is God, right? Because it's like that's everything.
You know, without perspective, we're missing all these points, and all it takes is one trip to the slum, or one day trip to the favela, and you're eating with these guys, these like, you know, gangsters, or these like, you know, these people who just like living and they're happy, and then the next thing you're in Manhattan and people are depressed, and you know, and then, you know, it's just, yeah, perspective's crazy.
I like that a lot. Perspective is God. That deserves to be on a bumper sticker or something. That's great. So after, did you head to Europe then?
Yeah, that same trip, you know, it was part of the connection to go from new world to old world. If I wasn't already in the new world, then I you know, maybe we would have gone old world to new. But since I'm a new world person, we went the other direction. Yeah, we went straight from Brazil to Lisboa in Portugal. So it was a good connection. You know, it was a perfect way to do this.
You had to go to Portugal after Brazil.
Yeah, you know, and then after that we did, you know, we stayed in Lisboa, but it was a shock because we were in it was like wintertime, but that means it's summertime in Brazil. So it was like 114 degrees. You know, it was like in the 40s in Celsius. It was like hot.
It's kind of like this kitchen.
Yeah. It was hot as fuck.
Yeah.
And we left Bahia too, which is even hotter. So we left Bahia in like 114 degrees, you know, 42 or something like that. And then we went straight to Lisboa in winter with like snow on the ground. So like the first day we're like shocked, you know, I'm like all stoked to go be eating some classic bacalhau and like all these like, you know, classic Portuguese dishes and things that I've seen spread out through, you know, Brazilian culture as well. So I was like, all right, you know, but it was like a weather shock and just like like the first couple of days we were all dying, but you know, we got over it and we ended up digging into the culture there. You know, the respect for the sea and the classical, you know, approach to a lot of Mediterranean, not even Mediterranean, but, you know, this part of Europe as well is about ingredients. So just people highlighting and respecting ingredients and not putting you know, too much of a twist on it, you know, not over seasoning things, you know, just a basic approach, very classical Italian. And a lot of people, they don't, if you have something good, you know, you just salt it, maybe a little white wine, you got some grilled bread, you know, little classic dishes.
Did you get to Africa at some point in this trip?
This trip, only Northern Africa. Okay. And you know, pretty much we only in Morocco, and it was on the map. You know, a lot of things were like, you know, it's hard to do as much as we did in a year anyway. And it was also like, I feel like Africa's a whole nother world. So it was almost like I wanted to go get around everything else and then like go back to that, because Africa's even like, you know, the pre all this, you know, there's a lot. At the same time, there was stuff going on in various parts of the world. Africa already been through a revolution in a sense, you know, they had a lot of changes and a lot of influence in the modern world of food and, you know, birthplace of people. You know, it's interesting.
You know, it's weird though. This is kind of a side note, but it's odd to me how a lot of African cuisines don't seem to get the respect, the recognition, or the exposure they deserve. Like in most major cities, like you'll find Indian restaurant for sure, Thai restaurant for sure, but maybe a French restaurant. But name an African restaurant. Like it seems like there's not as, I mean, you know, I went to university in Ottawa, which is where I got exposed to African food, because there was a really good Ethiopian restaurant that was kind of like a gateway drug to me for like exploring more African foods. But yeah, it's weird. Like there aren't more African restaurants around the world.
You know, it's mostly probably just the ignorance, because I think they're there in a lot of sense to, you know, I go back to New York every year as well, and there's all these, it's not just African, it's like this is Swahili and, you know, different parts of, you know, this obviously Ethiopia I think has always kind of had a buzz in the food world. You know, they have amazing food, and it's also like, you know, yeah, a big influence, but yeah, I think it's just the ignorance, man, and I think they're next on the list probably. Yeah. For places to pop. I think they already are popping a little bit. People are already starting to realize and you know, they're getting it.
Because there's some great cuisines and, you know, throughout Africa, yeah, for sure. Did you end up in Asia then? Is that where you finished this tour?
Yeah.
Where?
We went a couple places, but after real quick, after Portugal, Spain, Morocco, Italy, Greece, Turkey, and then a couple stops in between for more pleasure.
Okay, let's pause for 1 minute.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Greek food. What was Greece like?
I love Greece. It's one of my favorite places too because of the history and just.
Fascinating.
They have a very clean approach to food as well, and I think
What do you mean by clean?
It's balanced and it's all. I mean, clean in the sense of like there's not a lot of. It's like obviously seafood based in a sense. They use a lot of different fishes and braises, and then there's some pastas and different things as well. But it's more like it's a very like. In my opinion, it's a healthier food out of the regions because it's also out of the Mediterranean, but they all have their own little twist on things. But there's also it's a huge melting pot of the world from starting back with the Phoenicians, and people would just bounce all over the place, and it's such a melting pot of food that it's hard to tell. Like you see things that are like is that Turkish? Is that that looks like it could be Italian? It's like
even just geographically, it's at a really interesting kind of crossroads location.
Yeah. Definitely. But I mean, I think it's like a healthy, very clean food in the sense of like, you always get these like different kinds of salads, and there's not much, they don't. I have no problem with fatty foods as well. I like everything. And I think a lot of like old cultures balanced it well. Nowadays people just don't know how to eat because there's no education behind it. There's abundance of stuff that people, there's just overconsumption and people not wanting to be even educated. They don't even care. But olive oil, wine, olives. Different, even their breads there, a lot of them are in a traditional manner of like, fermentations and like, kind of sourdoughs and natural, whole grain, whole germ, wheats and stuff that, people don't do this kind of stuff anymore. And who knows if there's still, it's probably losing its culture as well because of the whole world is, but at the same time, they still, there's still a history there. And when there's a history, people, they stick to it even if they don't know. They're conditioned to continue on to
respect the tradition. Yeah. So after I cut you off, but you ended up in Asia.
Yeah, actually, first thing is we flew to Thailand because I already had roots, and it was also a quick R&R. We needed to take a break after all that, and we came up north and kind of just rented a house and used it as a kind of a jump off, which we weren't doing in other places. So we were moving constantly, and out here is easier to rent a spot and then go somewhere, come back, come back. And honestly, I wanted to hit a lot of places when I was out here. There's a lot of places that are influential and I thought was necessary. But I did a whole trip around Thailand as well. So to kind of document the Southeast Asian cuisines and then talk about the influence of different parts of Asia in general. The Yunnan Chinese and the Malay and the during the royal cuisine period in Thailand too, they would literally take stuff from. They were inviting chefs and people from all over to bring their most famous dishes, or they were also borrowing things from people and figuring out how to, pad thai being like a Thai version of a stir fry, and a lot of like the wok dishes like pak kapow and like all these dishes are like very Chinese in technique, and then then you have like the Isan section and like north east up here in the north as well. It's a whole nother influence of like kind of Burmese, which is Bangladeshi, which is northern Indian, which there's a long influence. And then the ingredients, the lemongrasses and the galangalas and the kaffir lime and the things that are like big natives to this area that stand out. The fact that there's coconut and these things got introduced into dishes that never had that before, and mountainous Himalayan cuisine, and like khao soi for instance, having coconut was never part of it. Egg noodles were never part of it. It was like turmeric, It was a an old dish that's probably changed, so much that we can barely recognize what the original is. But it's it was interesting. And then after that, China. So I did
You
two.
spent a lifetime just exploring the cuisines of China.
That's why I think I got overwhelmed, because at the end,
Yeah.
at the end of it, well, the two we did at the end was China and India.
Wow.
So I did 2 months in each.
Yeah.
And to try to do like a whole crazy country like that in 2 months, and try to do the best you could about picking pieces out and hitting places that are influential. Like I didn't even know where to start in China. Like a lot of people would question where I went, because it's like, where do you go when you're trying to like document Chinese cuisine? Like I would have been really cool to go up to like north, and then be cool to go like central, where a lot of like the kind of the same idea of rural cuisine or some of the cuisine was birthed. But we ended up in Shanghai first. It was a good place to fly in. Met one of my friends who's been living there a long time, and we did a little quick tour of regional cuisine in Shanghai to give me an introduction. And then this was my first trip to China too. So other places I've been before, like that was my second trip to Greece. Third trip to Spain. Like 20-something trip to Mexico. So it was my first trip. So it was intense. And then we ended up taking a train from Shanghai to Chengdu.
Which is one of the best food cities in the world.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like the heart of Sichuan cuisine, and it's.
Yeah.
I love Chengdu. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the highlight, indeed.
I love. What's the name of the peppercorn that numbs your mouth?
Yeah, I mean the Szechuan peppercorn.
Yeah, yeah.
There's the mala. Yeah, they got crazy food, and it's just like one of those areas in China that's a gateway, because it was, it's the southern Silk Road, the Horse Tea Road, Zen Buddhism, this chili culture that's still like unexplained. A lot of people believe that obviously the Europeans brought chilies, Portuguese brought chilies to Thailand, and this path, because they were the ones that were traveling and dispersing ingredients, but or whatever they were doing, colonizing and leaving stuff behind. But I'm a firm believer, and I think a lot of people would back me, and we know for a fact that the Chinese were in South America first, and they're also after the Chinese explored the world and mapped a lot of it out, they came back, and they literally burnt their fleets of ships. They closed their borders down. They didn't share the information. It wasn't documented in the same sense. I mean, I'm sure it is somewhere, but they definitely brought a lot of stuff back, and we're spreading it around that part, because there's like wild corn growing up there. There's been chilies in their cuisine for a long time.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong about this, but I feel like I was reading an article not long ago that basically said that more and more historians are becoming sympathetic to that theory. I don't know much about it at all, but it's really interesting.
Well, they won't. They're not cocky like white people are, and they literally, that's the basis of it. They kind of, they literally. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of and there's a lot of crazy stuff that we don't even that people don't even talk about. The fact like the Vikings, the Vikings were crossing over a long time ago.
Yeah, there's evidence of that, I believe, in the extreme east of Canada, in Newfoundland. Yeah,
definitely.
Which is, yeah.
They're finding like skulls of like 7 foot something, like redhead, like Viking dudes from, way before anyone else came over.
Imagine one of those guys washing up on your shore. You're just around the teepee having a good time, and then, whoa.
I can only imagine. And then also birds. Migration, there's points that, historians are trying to figure out how certain things travel between New and Old World before there was, this movement. And there was evidence that birds were when they were migrating across, they were bringing, they were shitting out chili seeds, and they were growing in parts of Africa.
I mean, that makes the most sense, right?
Yeah. And then who knows? Once they grew there, did they spread this? Did somebody bring a seed up there? It's like, you know, once they hit land paths, it's a different story. They kind of moved in a different way. But, you know, I think there's a boom in a sense, and then, you know, people adapted it, because before there was chilies in Africa, you know, they still had this bold cuisine, but they were using different versions of peppercorns and different herbs that had this similar spices to them, but nothing like chilies. You know, chilies were like sacred. You know, chilies were like the gods as well. You know, in Peru, I have a book over there, all about the spirituality and origin of chilies. It's all in Spanish, but wow. You know, in Peru, because it's like they have a respect for chilies, and you know, yeah, it's a melting pot.
So jumping ahead a little bit, after you complete this gargantuan food tour around the world, I mean, I want to ask you, what did you learn? But I imagine that would take up a hell of a lot of time to explain. But, well, what do you feel like you learned? How did that experience change you?
What do I feel like I achieved from it?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it was, you know, the whole goal, like I said, was to, you know, accumulate knowledge and information and just kind of like, you know, take it. I wanted to produce a book. I wanted to do a coffee table book or something that was, you know, informational and, you know, fun at the same time, and kind of like you let people know, you know, what's going on in the world, connecting the world through food and connecting people through food. You know, it was intense. So, you know, after that year, I kind of like, I needed a break. You know, a chef not really being in a kitchen for a long time too was complicated. So I was like, all right, I need to get back in that world. You know, I want to pick up my knives again. And I was like, you know, after all that information and not being able to cook was like, you know, something I really needed to do.
Can I pause you again?
Yeah.
So I love cooking, but I'm sure not a chef. But I think like I'm a musician, and if I haven't played guitar in a while, and I'll pick up the guitar, it'll take me a day or 2 or 3 to kind of get the feel back and to start feeling really comfortable again. Is it anything like that when you're a chef? Like if you take too long away, is getting back into it difficult?
I mean, for sure. It just depends.
Even just like your muscle reflexes and stuff, I would imagine, in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, that more than anything, I would say just movement, you know, figuring out like, are you working on a line? Are you working in a restaurant? Or are you cooking at home? I mean, it's organic in a sense of you know, being able to cook something again. It's picking up a knife, and you know, I don't think you'll ever really lose that. But you know, if you're actually working in a kitchen in a restaurant, you know, then you definitely got to get reacclimated, or you'll just, you know, people will just be spinning circles around you.
So is that what you did after the tour? You started working in a kitchen again?
No, I mean that same year I had plans. I still had stuff in Colorado because that was the last time I stayed there, and my plan was to move back here after that. And actually, it was all about the coffee business, because my dad was developing the roasters.
I see.
When I came and used Thailand,
like the actual machines, coffee roasters.
Yeah, the machines. He was developing and built the first one. So, you know, this roaster over here was the first one that got built around 6-something years ago. And when I was using Thailand as a base, as a jump point, you know, it was there. And I started using it, and you know,
Why did your dad build a coffee roaster?
Good question. I mean, it goes, you know, there's a little more information on the website, you know, on Left Hand Roasters. It talks about, you know, the fact that Thai coffee was introduced into Thailand as an alternative crop to opium. You know, it's part of the
Which is fascinating in itself. Yeah, I couldn't believe when I realized that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things too. Cacao and other, you know, cash crops that could be an alternative to opium were introduced here. You know, it was a UN project. It was you know, the king got involved, obviously. That's why it's, you know, named after him as well. You know, it was interesting. There was a lot of history, and there was a lot of people who needed help. So there's coffee growing all over the place. You know, all over northern Thailand, people were planting coffee and growing coffee, and they're not allowed to grow this crop that they've been growing for a long time that was making them a lot of money, or at least, you know, some people making more money than other people depending on what their position was. And people didn't know how to get rid of it. People didn't know how to process it. People didn't know how to, you know, roast it. People didn't know, you know, how to extract it. You know, even 5-6 years ago, coffee was, you know, horrible up here. You know, there wasn't many people doing it right. You know, 10 years ago, there's good coffee being grown, but it was all being exported. You know, and exported on a level that wasn't as nearly as profitable as a lot of stuff, and definitely not as profitable as opium.
Yeah.
You know, so
not many things are.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think that was a big point too, as we saw this good coffee being grown, and my dad was already getting into it. You know, coffee is it's for nerds, man. It's for geeks who.
Yes, it is.
You know, it's for people who want to get deep into something and try to understand it, which might never happen, and you'll just be caffeinated out.
All right, I want to talk about coffee in 1 minute.
Yeah.
Before that, I want to know. So, for anyone listening to this, I met Dustin because he owns the best Mexican restaurant in Thailand, and it's in kind of the middle of nowhere in this town called Pai in the hills of northern Thailand. It's called Cafecito. How did that happen?
You know, that's the same thing. I came back out here to that same year. I ended the trip. I didn't even make it around the world. You know, I left. 2 months in China, boom, 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 Yunnan, back over. Actually went to Nepal to study the Himalayan food. Oh, wow. So I did a month in Nepal I wanted to talk about, mountainous cuisine. That's a big, huge part of why we eat what we eat in this part of the world. Mm-hmm. And then I did 2 months in India. You know, right after I was done with my trip, I planned to fly back to Colorado, and instead I, got a wedding invitation, ended up in Germany again, ended up back in Europe, ended up in New York after that, Colorado after that, packed up all my stuff, decided I'd come back out here and work with my dad on developing the roasters and actually turning this into a business, the coffee. My dad's, he's scientific as well, so there's no business. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, had like 1 ton of coffee. Literally, he bought 1 ton of coffee in his house, and he had this roaster, and he was doing everything but business. But he's just like, he was roasting, he was selling stuff, but it needed to get organized. So I came out to help with that, and that's kind of where Cafecito came into place. And I think I got taken over with my desire to get back in the kitchen, and that's also why I opened Silhouette in Reverie Siam. That was the first big culinary project I probably ever did on my own. Being a executive chef and partner, and of this little boutique kind of 5-star resort up in the jungle on the river. It was very cool, building everything from scratch. And at the same time, I opened my own company, so I needed something to kind of it needed to run. So I did Cafecito. And I was doing coffee already. I wanted to do something else that took me kind of to my roots. So I said, okay, I'm going to do a Mexican brunch. What's good with coffee, brunch food, and I don't want to do normal brunch food. I'm going to do Mexican brunch. I'm going to do chilaquiles and huevos rancheros and, smothered breakfast things and, tortas and.
Yeah, it's legit, man. Yeah, that I was immediately curious about who set up this place when I went in there. I'm like, this is like amazing Mexican food in the middle of northern Thailand.
It was tough because we had to make everything from scratch, and I started growing my own chilies and doing stuff that most people wouldn't do, but you're trying to. That's the beauty of food in general. Like, we're talking about culinary anthropology, and this is what happens. 30 years from now, there could be people putting habaneros in their sum-tums and using different ingredients that were once planted here by somebody crazy like myself who wanted to see different kinds of Mexican chilies being grown here, and then they might evolve into something else bigger than we can even think.
Let's stay on coffee then, or go back to coffee rather. I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly over the past few years, taking things that I do every day and just trying to make them a lot better. So, like, I forget who told me, I think it was my grandfather, but when I was a kid, he's like, when you have the money, like, invest in like good shoes, for example, because you're going to wear those things every day, and like, take care of your feet. It's something you do every day. Why not make it good? Buy a nice pillow. You go to bed every night, things like that. And I'd say over the past 6 months to a year, I've started doing that with coffee. I'd always loved coffee. I have coffee every day. But particularly in the past 6 months, I say, like, I'm really trying to make my coffee experience better. So I grind my own beans now. I'm way snobbier with the beans I buy. I bought an AeroPress. I just got a pour over coffee thing. I'm really trying to like, and you said coffee's for nerds, like 100%. It's like once you start going down that rabbit hole, it's really easy to kind of get obsessed and reading more and all these, super geeky coffee blogs and stuff. What drew you to coffee, and tell me about Left Hand Roasters?
I wasn't a huge coffee person before that. I mean, I used it as a, like a lot of people use it as a, is a motivational, is caffeine, is something you need to consume in the day. Or I didn't drink it every day as well. I try not to overdo anything in life. So, moderation. And I think what really got me into it was just, seeing my dad build this roaster and then starting to taste and experiment with roasting, because it's, first, coffee is one of the most complicated. We could probably say this without, maybe some people out there might question this, but it's the most complicated plant in the world because it has more aromatic elements than anything else. So, that means the complexity of it. I mean, even that statement, it's kind of hard to get your head around, and even I'm still trying to figure out, like, what does that mean? What's an aromatic element? It essentially means that depending on how you take it, how it's processed, fermented, grown, the different varietal, down to the roasting, down to the extraction, you can get all these different, senses out of it and aromas. And, when you have the green beans, you start getting, you get these really like floral, grassy, nutty, sweet, and then you could even break them down and further and be like, oh, lemongrass, or like, vanilla, strawberries, and, currant, and, guava and passion fruit. And, there's all these like similarities in coffee that remind you to other things. And I think that's what the most interesting thing about aromatics in general is the fact that all those senses, aromatics, are connected to your memory and connected to your sense. And, they'll bring you back somewhere. Oh, I used to eat rhubarb pie when I was a kid, and I tasted this like, honey process.
You'll be drinking a cup of coffee, and there'll be like a subtle note in it that reminds you of something else, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's like food too. You'd be eating something. It's like anything that you consume or you smell before. I mean, wine. Like we, talked about before a little bit, wine is really the gateway to coffee for me, because I've always been fascinated with wine in the same sense too, because it's all about the terroir, it's all about the land. It's like, what water was the plant, what was the water in the area? What was the air like? What was the, the minerality in the soil? What else influenced it, or what else, changed it?
There's so many variables, right?
Yeah. The natural yeast in the air, like, there's like natural wines and or biodynamic. That's why they're coming back into style right now, because you're tasting, the terroir, which is pretty much you're going to a place through taste, through aromatics. You're literally taking like this vacation to another spot by consuming something. And that's why coffee's interesting too, and that's why I really want to see Thai coffee, leave Thailand more. And my project, Left Hand Roasters, it's something I kind of always wanted to do. I'm calling it community conscious Thai coffee, because the whole idea is to big up the community through the processors, obviously the farmers, the processors. I'm doing the roasting, but I also want to connect and collaborate with other roasters, which I do. There's a lot of amazing people up here, Lee from Aka'ama, and like Lalita from Omnia, and Pong from Ponganese, and Tay, Graf, and T. There's all sorts of cool people who are doing like doing justice, representing, and they're Thai, so once again, I don't want to be, I'm not trying to take the light, but I want to, I'm trying to get it some recognition.
And like, I don't think we mentioned this before, but yeah, for anyone listening, like the coffee scene in Northern Thailand is just exploding right now. Yeah. But again, most of the rest of the world doesn't know about it, right? We take it for granted that Chiang Mai has, I would argue, one of the best cafe scenes in the world. Yes. I mean, it's astonishing, yes, the number and quality of amazing cafes in beautiful locations, and the consistently jaw-dropping quality of the actual beans and the coffee itself. I mean, it's astounding. And again, it's one of these really well-kept secrets. So, I mean, why do you think more people don't know about Northern Thai coffee? Do you think it's simply because it's so new?
Yeah. I mean, multiple reasons, definitely because it's so new. I would consider this to be the newest and up and coming. I mean, it is. It's like the newest and most, people don't know yet. Like Southeast Asia in general. I mean, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam. They all have their own unique qualities to it. And 5 years ago, I'd go back to the States. I'm in San Francisco. I'm popping into Blue Bottle, Sight Glass. I'm up in Portland checking out Hart and checking out Stumptown. And I'm in New York hanging out with the Brooklyn Roasters and a lot of these guys I like to visit over there. And everyone's like, Thai coffee? Right. 5 years ago, what? 4 years ago, maybe, 3 years ago, some people, 2 years ago, oh yeah, you're from Chiang Mai. And
so
now
it's slowly starting.
Now people know. Now people are starting to know. And people who are like coffee geeks are definitely like, I'm interested. I'm getting emails all the time. I'm trying to figure out how I can send roasted coffee around because people are like, we want some of that, some of that interesting Thai coffee over here. And it's a novelty, it's a specialty thing to get, to consume something somewhere else. And as much as I'm about sustainability and like, just being responsible as a human being, it's hard for me to say I want to send. It's not my goal to send stuff over there. It's my goal to get Thai coffee out around here. And then in the future, if I started doing like coffee on a larger scale somewhere else, Thai coffee, like I would do it a slower approach, send the green bean by boat, bring a roaster over there and have a little satellite roaster that does like Thai coffee. But, I think it's something we got to share. It's like wine, I think wine kind of broke my, my reasoning in when it comes to sustainability, because when it comes to food, I won't import anything, and I'll try to make the best I can with what I got. And it's a handicap. Even right now roasting Thai coffee, it's like it's starting to get better, but it's still not Ethiopia. It's still not, Panama geishas and, all this Colombia. There's a lot of, Mexico has amazing coffee. There's amazing coffee all over Yemen, There's a lot of good coffee here, but the majority of it's still not
at
there.
That level.
Yeah. And
do you feel like it's getting closer, like with working with the farms and stuff? Like, do you think it's getting
there's a lot
better?
of people who care. And I think that's what we need right now. We need people who care. There's a lot of people who don't care and people who are doing it just for commercial, and they're selling it to people like Nestle and Starbucks, and they're just, they don't even care. They're just buying the cheapest commercial grade, Arabica, and then just, burning the shit out of it and putting it in bags and hustling it off. Right. A lot of it's export. So when we're talking specialty coffee. So, the majority of the world doesn't drink specialty coffee, whatever that means. It's, it's really about, the micro lots and people actually putting love and care into something and separating the different varietals before roasting or before processing even, it's, there's not many people who are going that route. And not a lot of people, the consumers as well, a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of people like burnt coffee.
Let's start to change that right now.
Yeah.
Like let's end this podcast. Like, I'm a guy who used to I always loved coffee, but I used to not scoff at coffee geeks, but I used to not quite get it. Yeah. And I'm like, now I'm on the other side of the fence. Like, I really get it. Yeah. And the parallels with wine, I think, are pretty apt. I mean, because again, like if you have really good coffee that's done right, there's so many notes in it and variations between beans and the way it's roasted and the way you choose to extract it. I mean, there's so much to learn. So if I may be so bold, ending the podcast just with like some practical tips, I would say if anyone wants to have a better coffee experience, grind your own beans. I mean,
Definitely.
That makes a huge, I couldn't believe the difference, even just that simple.
Definitely. That's one of the most crucial things too, is because, once you grind the coffee, it starts to lose its aromatic elements. It starts to lose the.
You like that word, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, as a chef as well, it's very important, the aromatics. But it's losing. You're losing that. You're losing the essence. They say, I don't know, something within 15 to 30 seconds you lose like 30% of the of the aromatics, and that definitely changes the experience. And then at the same time, if we're talking on how you're consuming it as well, you know, your extraction. And, you know, for me, drinking lighter roasted coffee is not just about, you know, it's about flavor as well, and then it's a purist approach. But if you want to taste the fruit of the coffee, you want to actually figure out what's in it. If you burn it, you're tasting carbon.
Right.
You know, you're not getting the experience. It's like buying a good steak and overcooking it, or buying, you know.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Apparently that's how he takes his steak.
I'm sure he takes everything like that. You know, getting some beautiful organic vegetables and just like, you know, boiling the shit out of them. Right. You know, you're taking all the vitamins, the nutrients, the essence of it. You know, and coffee is like, I think one thing you have to get used to drinking lighter roasted coffee is you're actually getting more of the benefits of the coffee. You know, antioxidants and the nutrients that are in the coffee. You know, by burning it, you're not getting those. You know, it's the same thing by eating an overcooked vegetable. You know, you overcook the vegetable, you're killing it. You know,
that's a really important point. Yeah.
You know, it's and it's also like, you know, you're not gonna get to taste anything. You know, you might as well just buy, you know, bad coffee if you're gonna do that anyway. But then it takes getting used to. You know, a lot of people, which, you know, I hear all the time is, oh, sour.
Right.
Oh, especially in Thailand. You know, Thai people are sensitive to acidity on its own. You know, they're used to bold flavors. You know, at least all of them combined with the acidity. But if you don't have the sweetness and the, you know, the spice and the umami and, you know, all these things, they're missing the point. They're just like, oh, it's only sour. I'm like, well, coffee's, you know, it's a fruit, and, you know, there's definitely a high acidity to it. And then Thai coffee as well is known for its acidity. There's a lot of katui, which is like a crossover, and it's also known for its, you know, brightness and you know, lack of body kind of. So I mean, I think Thai coffee is getting better because a lot of people are coming in and trying to, you know, introduce new techniques and improve something. You know, it's like you know, improve the quality of what you already have. You know, there's different ways of lowering the acidity, like the malolactic fermentation we're doing, or like the aging in the wine barrels or casks, or, you know, you're actually changing the structures of it. You know, you're curing it in a sense. Your fermentation is, you know, key in everything. You know, food as well. It's like, you know, it's one of the most important things that I think people take for granted. You know, cultures and you know, we wouldn't have cheese, we wouldn't have, you know, medicines, we wouldn't have, you know, a lot of things. So it's yeah, it's an exciting time, and I can't wait to see, you know, what happens with Thai coffee, and I hope it gets its respect, and every year it gets better. So, you know, keep going.
Absolutely, man. And I think that day is coming. I really do. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
You know, probably through my website. You know, lefthandroasters.com. Yeah. Email me.
When are you gonna have t-shirts? Dustin has really good branding, man. Like, it would make a nice t-shirt.
Soon.
Really nice branding.
Soon. I was looking at it actually. Probably some hats and some shirts, and cool. Yeah, definitely soon. It's on my list. You know, currently I'm you know, I also just launched something I've always wanted to do is branding my own kitchen equipment. So, you know, tools, utensils. I just launched a project called Kitchen E-commerce, kitchenecommerce.com, and it's all about, you know, giving young chefs, restaurant workers, people who need the right tools for their trade at affordable prices. You know, so we're pretty much getting on-branded quality equipment, and we're selling it online. You know, delivered, you know, straight to your doorstep. You know, free shipping.
Worldwide, or?
Yeah, worldwide.
Great.
You know, we're only unlocking certain countries at a time, but, you know, at this point, we're doing some in Europe. We're doing it in the U.S. You know, there's all sorts of. It's starting to open, so now I'm trying to figure out how to, like, really validate it and get some chefs backing it and, you know, move forward. But it's something I've always wanted to do, and design my own tools as well. So, you know, in between this and that, and, you know, working with, like, the kind of a slow food movement in Thailand, and all about sustainability and, you know, insight into that, you know, I'm always moving.
Very good. So lefthandroasters.com and kitchenecommerce.com.
Yeah.
Great. Well, man, we got to do this again.
2 new projects.
Yeah, I feel like there's more we could definitely talk about. So let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, we could do a whole music. Yeah, this is definitely.
Thanks for this, man.
Yes, pleasure.
All right.
Cool, bro.
There you have it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed that kitchen table conversation with Dustin Joseph. A reminder that you can find information about Dustin and his coffee project at lefthandroasters.com. You can find show notes and links to everything we talked about today at humansinlove.com. And I'll also ask you to please leave a rating and review of Humans in Love using Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. It's good to be back after taking August off, and I have a lot of great interviews lined up already for this month. I'll be sharing some great new episodes with you very soon, so if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and visit humansinlove.com to sign up for my wacky, weird little mailing list. Before I let you go, my friends, I'll remind you that life is short, far too short, in fact, to drink bad coffee. Thanks a lot, folks. I will talk to you again next week.